In this movie, we're going to look at another approach that we can take to adding custom artwork to the surfaces of our model. In our graffiti gallery, we have that large, massive wall that we created that was created from some free-form massing components, and it curves in multiple directions. You can't use the decal feature on something that's double curving. If we wanted to add a decal to the turret here on the townhouse, that would work just fine. But if it's curving in two directions at the same time, then the decal feature doesn't work. But it turns out that we can create a custom material instead and achieve basically the same result. It just takes a little bit more effort to set it up. So let me show you the process here. And I'm going to go down to my 3D views. I'm in the file called Samoka V6. And I have a couple 3D views of the graffiti gallery. And I'm going to open up this one right here, which is a nice axonometric. Double click that. And what I've done here is I've cropped everything away using a section box. If I do reveal hidden elements, it's this box right here. So that's what's cutting everything else away so that I can focus just on the graffiti wall itself. And what I want to do is put a nice big mural here of some graffiti. Currently, this wall has got concrete block material assigned to it. And I'm going to take that material, make a copy of it, and apply the graffiti bitmap texture to it that we've provided in the exercise files. So let me go to the Manage tab and click on Materials. And I'm going to start with that concrete masonry units material. This is just the out-of-the-box material. And I'm going to duplicate that. And I'll call this graffiti wall. Sometimes I put an underscore in front of the name just to make it go to the top of the list. Makes it a little easier to find it later. So there's graffiti wall. Now on the graphics tab, the only thing I want to do is change the surface pattern. I don't want it to be the concrete block pattern. Even though I'm envisioning this being a block wall that's painted, I want to use a pattern that actually matches the size of the bitmap texture that I have. So I've measured the entire wall, and the entire wall is about 73 feet wide by about 39 feet tall. So what I'm going to do here is click this Browse button, make sure that Model Pattern is selected, and I want to create a new model pattern. Now this new pattern is going to be called Graffiti Texture, and I want it to be a crosshatch pattern, 0 degrees, so that one's rotated 45, and I'll change it to 0, and I want that to be my 39 feet in one direction by my 73 feet in the other direction. How do I know which is which? Frankly, I just did some trial and error. At a 0 degree, I wanted 39 by 73. If you put 73 by 39, it just means you'd have to come back and make the line angle 90. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I will leave that up to you. There's my graffiti texture. I'm going to click OK, and that's right there. If I just applied that to the surface, we would just see maybe 1 or 2 lines appear on the surface of that wall. So the next thing we have to do is go to the Appearance tab, and this loads up the Appearance Property Set library, and we can choose either from existing materials that are already in the Autodesk library, or we can create our own. Well, what I'm doing here is I'm fine with the relief pattern that's already assigned to this. That's why I started with the brick wall, because I want it to kind of look like it's painted on bricks. So I'm not going to do anything there. What I am going to do is click right here. You see how this kind of highlights like a hyperlink when I move over it? If you click on that, it takes you to a browse window, and you can choose a different texture. Now it's taking me to the default material library that comes with the software. I'm going to go to my desktop, my exercise files, and chapter 8, and I'm going to choose this file called graffiti. And I'll open that up. I want to click right on the little swatch here and make some modifications, because clearly this is not quite what I had in mind. First of all, it defaults to a 4x4 repeat. Secondly, it defaults to a repeat. Neither of those I want. I want to set it to the sizes that my wall actually is, and I don't want it to repeat. So I'm going to scroll down over here, and for the scale, I want to make sure that I'm not linked. You see this little thing, if you click that in, it's keeping the proportions locked. I want to make sure that's not checked so that I can put in the actual width and the actual height. So it's 73 feet wide, and in this dialog, you've got to remember to type feet. I'm not really sure why that is, but If you just type 73, it actually sees it as inches. And I'll do 39 feet. And that resizes it, and you can see here and here. The next thing is it defaults to tile and tile in the horizontal vertical direction. I'm going to change that to none and none. So we're only going to get it one time. And then one last thing, in order to help me position this texture on the surface of the wall, I'm going to check this box right here to link texture transforms. What that does, when I click done and I go back to materials and graphics, is that links it up to this surface pattern that we set up a moment ago. So the whole reason I did the surface pattern is just to help me position this texture on the surface of the wall. So let's click OK. And now I need to apply that new material to this wall. I could select the wall and go to Edit Type and apply it to the wall, but then it would apply it to every instance of this wall throughout the project, and that may not be what I had in mind. So instead, I'm going to go to Modify, and I'm going to use the Paint tool. So the Paint tool allows me to literally use a material like a bucket of paint and just paint it on a surface. So there's Graffiti Wall right at the top. That's why I use the underscore to make it easier to find. Click on it, and then you see how it highlights this surface of the wall? I'll just paintbrush it right on there and click done. If I tab in here, you see this line right here and this line right here? That's that texture that we set up. So you can see that it went right to the middle. And what I want to do is shift it over and shift it down. And I can do that right here in 3D, but it might be a little easier to use this section that I have set up right here. So I'm going to go to Section at Graffiti Wall, tab in to this line here, and I don't have to do this terribly precisely. I'm just going to drag it to about there, and then do the same thing here, drag it to about there. Now let me toggle on realistic here, and we're really close, but we might want to fine-tune the position of this texture a little bit. If I go back to hidden line, the trouble is I've lost my line there that I used on my texture. So I just set the texture size initially to the same size as the overall bitmap, just because that seemed like a logical thing to do and it was convenient, but there's nothing saying I can't go to the Manage tab, click on Additional Settings, go to Fill Patterns, and change this to Model Pattern, because that's the kind of pattern I was doing, and just change the spacing of my graffiti texture. So let's edit it, and I'm just going to half this size to give myself an extra line to use to move this around. So instead of the 73 feet, I will put in 36.6. So let's click OK, OK again, and that gives me just an extra line right here that I can now tab into again, and maybe just nudge that just a little further about there. It's just a little bit of back and forth between making the adjustment, seeing how you like it, trying again. Looks like I could even go a little bit further because the bitmap kind of ends at an angle here. So it's not a perfect square, neither is my wall. That's part of the challenge there. Let me go back to hidden line, tab in one more time. Just nudge it just a little more. Right about there. I'm feeling pretty good about that one. Let's go to our camera view of this gallery. Graffiti Wall camera. Let's double click that. That will give me the view with a little bit of the surrounding context. And I've previously set up the sun position to match the north direction of the building. And I've also turned on the shadows here using this control right here. And on the sun settings, I created a setting called graffiti, which I just figured out what time of day it would take to get the sun to come streaming in through that window. And it looks pretty good. So we're now ready to go off to our client meeting and wow them with what we've come up with.